Over the weekend, I came across an article on my Facebook. And the article was titled, Florida Woman Makes $922,000 a Year on Turo with 69 Cars. Then the next morning on Sunday, I was looking at YouTube, and on my YouTube homepage, I saw a video from Super Speeder Rob recommended to me breaking down this exact same article. So of course, I was curious and I clicked on Rob's video, I watched it, and then I scrolled through the comments and I saw you guys had mentioned me in a number of different comments, which just made my morning. And so after watching Rob's video and after reading the article, I thought that it would be fun to do a bonus video this week where I give my 2 cents on this type of fleet, this type of revenue, and give my thoughts on whether or not it's actually realistic. Now, I do want to preface all of this by saying I am not in the exotic car market. My cars are low-end economy cars, and I've never rented out a Lamborghini on Turo before. So I will be taking some of the exotic knowledge that I'll use in this video from Rob's video. He has a ton of experience with exotic cars, and I'll of course also be using my nearly 6 years of experience on Turo as well. So let's first break down some of the facts of the article. So the article states that a Florida woman named Natalia Zorina started her Turo business back in 2018, and today she scaled her fleet to 69 cars, which includes vehicles like Ferraris, Porsches, Aston Martins, and Lamborghinis. In her photo, you can also see that there are more cars like Maybachs, Bentleys, Rolls Royces, and more. The article goes on to say that she earned $922,225 from Turo last year. They started back in 2018, and by 2021, they got their first investor, which really springboarded them into the fleet that they have today. I did find her profile, but I'm not going to include it in the video or in the description for security reasons because I haven't spoken to this host and I don't know her personally, so I certainly wouldn't want my profile shared without my consent. But according to her profile, she has 2,500 trips. Now, let's first go over some of the facts. This host has 69 cars. The article states that they are all high-end, luxury, or exotic. She has at least 1 investor. She has 3 employees. She rents a parking garage for $175 per space. She lives in Miami, and the article states that she earned $922,000 from these cars last year. The article states that her lowest priced car is $75 per day and her highest is $1,700, but according to her Turo profile, the lowest I can see is $63 per day and the highest is $5,429. Now in Rob's video from Super Speeder Rob, he breaks down these earnings based off of the $922,000 being these hosts' earnings, the amount that's displayed in her earnings graph in the Turo app. And to be honest, that was also my knee-jerk reaction. I was thinking whenever I was reading this article that this $922,000 was her host earnings. And originally, whenever I had planned on making this video, I was going to break down this $922,000 figure and basically break down how much money this host is earning each and every month, very similar to what Rob did in his video. The problem though is that I don't know that this $922,000 is her host earnings, and I'm actually inclined to believe that it's her take-home pay. The reason is because if we take $922,000 per year, we divide that by 69 cars and 12 months, that means that each one of these cars would only be making about $1,100 per month, which is absolutely horrific for a $200,000 or $300,000 car. That's like the amount that my budget $5,000 cars make. So I do not think that this $922,000 is actually these host earnings. I think that it is some form of income after expenses have been paid. But the question is, what does the expenses take into account? Is this the amount that she makes after all of the expenses have been paid, but before the investor has been paid? Is this the amount that she makes before the car payments have been made? Or is this the amount that this person takes home after everything has been paid? There are just so many factors here at play that I cannot simply know the answers to, and because of that, I can't confidently say whether or not this host is actually making $922,000 per year from 69 exotic cars, but it definitely is possible. I know hosts that have between 70, 80, 100 vehicles and are making around that amount, if not more. So to say that a host that owns 69 cars is making nearly $1 million per year profit, it certainly is possible, but whether or not that profit is taking into account things like depreciation, insurance, car payments, those are questions that we simply will never know the answers to. So rather than dedicating this video to breaking down this specific Turo host's monthly income, I instead want to break down kind of what the math of something like a Lamborghini Huracan would look like, and I want to compare that to the math of something like an economical car. But in order to do that, let's take out the whiteboard. So here we have our magic whiteboard here that I spent quite a lot of time breaking down all of these numbers. Now, it has been a long time since I whipped out the whiteboard for this channel. In fact, I don't know if I've ever done it. I think I may have just just reserved this whiteboard for the car sharing masterclass, so I'm excited to break down these numbers for you today. Now, before we dive in, I do want to preface this by saying that it is extremely difficult to accurately predict a host's earnings on Turo. And this is because there are simply so many different factors that come into play whenever we talk about earnings. You have the daily trip price of the vehicle, but you also have how much Turo takes of that as well. And it could be 10%, it could be 30%, it could be 40%. We do not know that, only the host knows that. We also have to take into account, of course, your expenses. So the monthly car payment, insurance, parking, cleaning, maintenance, repairs, depreciation, and so many other factors that it is extremely difficult, if not impossible, to break down these numbers accurately. Okay, so now let's dig into the numbers. So we have two columns here. One is the economy car. We're using a Hyundai Sonata in this example. The other is a Lamborghini Huracan, which is of course an exotic high-end car. And I pulled these numbers off of a few different sources. Number one, just off of my own knowledge of car sharing and just the car market. Number two, off of Rob's video, because he's definitely more experienced in the exotic world than I am. And then number three, from the Business Insider article itself and from the Turo host Turo profile. So we're comparing the Hyundai Sonata to the Lamborghini Huracan. And whenever we look at purchase price, the economy car, the Hyundai Sonata, is priced at $7,000. I think that you can find a Hyundai Sonata for quite a bit less than that. You can also find them for more. So I priced it at $7K. The Lamborghini Huracan, we priced at $200,000, which truthfully I think is a little bit too low, but that is kind of the example that Rob used in his video. So we're gonna go with that number as well. The price of the Lamborghini Huracan, according to the Turo host profile, is about $1,000 per day, so we're gonna go with that daily rate. For a Hyundai Sonata, in most markets, you can get about $45 per day for that car. Next, we have utilization. So utilization is what percentage of time is a car booked out. Now, utilization is tricky because it's very difficult to figure out how much a car is actually utilized. You guys may see, like on a Turo profile, there's like the trip count next to a car, which can be a good gauge to see like how much demand there is surrounding a specific car, but it actually gives you no indication of utilization, because you could have a car that had 100% utilization for 1 month, but it only went out on one trip. If it was like a 30-day month, 30-day trip, that would be one trip, but it would be 100% utilization. On the other hand, you could have something like a Lamborghini go out on 2 one-day trips. That is a very low utilization, but it's 2 trips instead of 1. So like trip count isn't an accurate indicator of utilization. It's something that's very, very hard to tell. Now, I gave the Hyundai Sonata an 80% utilization. I think in most markets that's probably fairly accurate. In my market, it's closer to that 80 to 85 percentage point. In some markets, it's less, but I just went with 80 for the sake of averages here. Then for the Lamborghini Huracan, this was tricky. I don't really know what the utilization is for a Lamborghini Huracan. I know that whenever I had my Maserati Ghibli, the utilization was about 50%. I would imagine that a car that is roughly 10 times the price of a Maserati Ghibli would be significantly lower, but we also have to take into account that the market is Miami, so that is an entirely different segment of, audience in Dallas. So I did 30%. I personally think that that is a pretty fair utilization, if not a little bit high, but we're gonna go with that figure. That means based off of these utilization rates, the Hyundai Sonata is gonna be making about $1,116 per month. The Lamborghini is gonna be making about $7,440 per month. Now, you may notice that there's an asterisk next to both of those, and that's because whenever we're talking about these kind of broad figures, it's not taking into account some other income sources as well. For example, damage claims, convenience fees, overage miles, smoking claims, cleaning fees. Those are extra income sources that can come from a Turo rental, and we are not taking into those account at all. And so these are not including anything additional, it's just the daily rate. But then of course we have to take into account Turo's percentage, which can vary quite a lot from anywhere between 10 and 40%. We're gonna go kind of right in the middle at 20. And that means that after Turo takes their 20%, you're left with $7,440 per month for the Lamborghini Huracan. You're left with $893 per month for the Hyundai Sonata. Now, of course, we have to take into account expenses, because without expenses, you cannot run a business. And anybody who says that their Turo earnings is their actual take-home pay is definitely lying. There are absolutely expenses associated with running a Turo fleet. So first of all is the car payment. Now, whenever you are talking about a Hyundai Sonata, something like a $7,000 car, it's very realistic that that car can be paid for in cash. And of course, because of that, you would have a $0 car payment. In fact, my 25 car fleet is owned outright. I have no car payments. With a Lamborghini Huracan, the car payment is going to be about $3,000 per month. This was actually taken into account with a $20,000 down payment and a 5% interest rate, which for a Lamborghini is a pretty good, I think, especially in this point in time, an unrealistic interest rate. And it's also taking into account that you would have invested $20,000 in order to put that down payment down for that Lamborghini Huracan. So that means that monthly payment would be $3,000 per month. Now, whenever it comes to insurance, this is where there's a lot of difference between an exotic and a low-end economy car. For my fleet, I pay about $65 per month for insurance for my vehicles. I used to pay $55, but it actually just went up last month. So it's at $65 per month. Insurance for a Lamborghini is about $500 per month. This is something that I didn't really know a lot about. I don't know for sure how much insurance for a Lamborghini costs, especially ones for commercial use. I think $500 in my head sounds like a lot, but according to my research, it's actually probably a little bit conservative, and it probably does cost a bit more to actually insure a Lamborghini for the purpose of renting it out on Turo. But for the sake of this example, we're gonna go with $500. Maintenance and repairs is another tricky one that is really hard to predict. With my fleet, we typically put aside $50 per month for maintenance and repairs. You know, a lot of months we don't have any maintenance and repairs, and we spend very little, if anything at all, on maintenance. But other months where we do need tires and we need oil changes and all of those types of things, we'll spend a few $100. But $50 per month is typically where we sit on average for my vehicles, which is where I got that number from. For a Lamborghini, on average, with a normal Lamborghini that somebody buys for their own use, it's going to cost roughly, $2,000 to $2,500 per year to maintain that vehicle. But whenever we talk about rental cars, everything gets worn out way quicker. You have more mileage on the cars. People tend to treat the car poorly. I would say even with exotics, this is true. So the cars typically tend to wear down significantly faster than if just somebody was to buy a Lamborghini Huracan for themselves. So I personally think that this $200 number is, I think, a little too low, but I just have no idea what to estimate for a Turo Lamborghini, how much that would cost to maintain per month. So we're gonna go with that $200 figure. Then we of course have miscellaneous charges, and this is another one that's difficult to predict. You have things like parking, tracking, car washes, just like miscellaneous things that the car needs. These are all things that need to be taken into account. Now, whenever it comes to my own fleet, I spend $200 per month for parking for all of my cars. So that is for 5 spaces, $200 per month for all 5. This Turo host that was in the Business Insider article, she said that she paid $175 per month per space, but we don't know if she actually has 69 spaces or how that math works out. So it's very hard to say. You also, of course, have things like your car washes. I pay $8 per car wash whenever I take it to a car wash. I just run it through like your, run-of-the-mill neighborhood car wash. You, of course, could not do that with the Lamborghini Huracan. So in my experience, whenever you get to the nicer realm of cars, and this is something I experienced directly whenever I had my Maserati Ghibli, everything becomes more pricey because you're not going to run a Lamborghini through a $8 car wash. You're not going to get a cheap tracker with a Lamborghini. You're not gonna park your Lamborghini in a budget business center parking lot like I do with my cars. So everything tends to be significantly more expensive whenever you get into that higher realm of vehicle. For me, for like miscellaneous fees and charges and things like that, I spend about $50 per month. That includes car washes, trackers, the parking lot where I store my vehicles. For the Lamborghini, I estimated that's around $300 per month. That's my estimation. I don't know for sure if that's accurate, but I think that could be pretty spot on, depending on the city, of course. Then of course we have employees, which is another very tricky topic to estimate because we just don't know what is involved with these employees. What's their hourly rate? What's the tax situation? Do they have benefits? How often do they work? There's just simply too many factors to take into account. Now for the employee situation with the exotic cars, I took into account that the Business Insider article did say that she had 3 employees. I averaged that based off of a $11 per hour wage, which is the minimum wage in Florida. And then I basically took how much these employees would be working if they worked full time. And then I divided it by the 69 cars that she has, which comes out to $76 per month per car. For me, I have 1 employee that works part-time with me. I actually pay him $20 per hour, which means that for my fleet, I pay pay him about $64 per month per car. But that isn't all. We of course still have depreciation, another topic that is very important in the world of car sharing and Turo, and something that I think a lot of Turo hosts tend to forget and skate over. Now, whenever it comes to depreciation, this is something that's always top of mind for me, which is why I'm constantly telling you guys about buying cars at the lowest point in their depreciation curve. I buy cars whenever they are no longer depreciating, and if they are, they're only depreciating a very, very small amount. In fact, in the 30 to 35 cars that I've owned over the years, I have never lost money on a vehicle before. I've always been able to sell that car and either break even on the car or make money from the car. As a result, whenever it comes to depreciation with my fleet, I put it as 0. This is of course going to be dependent on what price you pay for a car, as well as a handful of other factors, but getting a $0 depreciation with a low-end economy car is absolutely possible. But whenever we talk about a Lamborghini Huracan, this is where it gets a little bit more dicey, and it's not as much possible to do this. Now, based off of basic math of a car depreciating, or an exotic car like a Lamborghini depreciating about 25% in that first 5 years, I kind of concluded that it's going to cost roughly $833 per month in depreciation for something like a 2020 Huracan. Now, of course, the car market is a crazy place right now, and for a couple of years there, you were able to buy something like a Huracan, drive it for 6 months to a year, and then sell it for a profit. But those times are absolutely coming to an end, and I am not confident that that's going to be possible in the future. So I wouldn't be surprised if the $833 number becomes significantly higher. But again, we don't know that for sure, so we just have to go by historical data. And last, but certainly not least, you have to take into account investors, which is something that was mentioned in the Business Insider article. Now, for me, I don't have investors. I own all of my fleet outright. Me and my husband, HP, do. And as a result, whenever we make our money at the end of the month, we don't have to write a check to anybody else. That money is ours. It's going into our pockets, and we can spend it however we please. In this case, the Turo host did say that she did have an investor. Now, we don't know the investor breakdown. We don't know how much the investor is getting versus how much this Turo host is getting, but a very common number that's used in the world of Turo is a 60-40 split. So 60 going to the operator, 40 going to the investor. So we're gonna go based off of that number because it is so common. Now, with this in mind, that means the investor gets paid out $1,012 per month for this Lamborghini Huracan, which brings the grand total to $1,519. For a car like a Hyundai Sonata, you could expect to walk away at the end of the month profiting $664 for that car. So as you can see, $1,519 for something like a Lamborghini in this like rough math scenario, and something like a Hyundai Sonata would be making $664. Now, a few things that I think are important to note is that according to this Business Insider article, this host is making about $1,100 roughly per car per month. And as you can see, that's actually less than what I estimated. And so based off of what I know about Turo and just car sharing in general, I think that that actually is maybe possible. I think that she probably is telling the truth. Now, I think that there are a lot of pieces of the puzzle that we simply don't know the answers to. Like, what is the tax situation? Cars can be a great place to get some major depreciation, so her tax bill actually probably is much less than you would think. But there's also, of course, the factor of like, okay, what's the role of the investor? What is the situation if these cars need to be sold? Who kind of absorbs that cost when that happens? And what are the additional overhead that also occurs with a fleet of that size? Another thing that is important to take into account is that like whenever you grow and scale your fleet, and this is something that I've learned whenever I've grown my fleet to 25 cars, is that your expenses and your profit isn't linear. It's not like it just goes up straight as you get more and more cars. It's going to go up and down depending on your expenses. And so like one really great example is like an employee, is that at some point in time as you grow, you're going to have to onboard an employee. I reached that point at 25 cars. And so whenever I reached 25 cars, I now had to pay this employee. So that means that the amount that my cars were making per car actually went down once I reached 25, because at that point, HP and I could no longer handle 25 cars. We had to get an employee. And there's a lot of other like factors that are very similar to that. For example, at some point in time, you need to get a shop. HP and I think that we'll probably need to get a shop at 35 cars, which means that once we hit 35 cars, the profitability of each individual car is going to go down even more. So the scaling of a car sharing fleet, it's not like if you get one car, you'll make $600. If you get two, you'll get $1,200. If you get 10, you'll get $12,000. If you get 20, it'll be $24,000. There are expenses that go up along with the growth of your fleet. And that's something that, again, is impossible to predict with these types of situations where we just simply don't know the numbers. So ultimately, the conclusion here is that I actually think it's possible that this host is making $1,100 per car per month, which would equate to $922,000 per year. I think that this could very realistically be her take-home pay, but the reality is that in this type of situation, there's a big problem with that number. So whenever we break down the ROI of something like a $200,000 car versus a $7,000 one, and we take into account the $1,000 per day daily rate versus the $45 per day daily rate, a $45 daily rate on a $7,000 car is 0.64% of the value of that car, while a $1,000 daily rate is 0.5% of the cost of the Lamborghini. So you can see that, like, according to the daily rate, they're not too far off, but the Hyundai is actually higher. Now, where we really get a huge difference in ROI is with the expenses. So whenever we talk about the, net income that we broke down just a few minutes ago on the other side of the whiteboard, the Hyundai Sonata is going to make about $664 per month take-home pay. That's money in your pocket. While in the example that I made, the Lamborghini Huracan will make about $1,500 per month in your pocket at the end of the month. Now, whenever you break down ROI on that, what I always like to account for is how much of that money that you're making per month, what is that percentage of compared to the car? So how much money are you making back on that investment of the vehicle each and every month? Now, in the case of the Lamborghini Huracan, you're making about 0.75%, 75 points of that vehicle value back each and every month. At that rate, it's going to take you about 133 months or 11 years to make that $200,000 back. That Lamborghini will not survive 11 years being rented out on Turo, but that's how long you'll have to have it rented out on Turo consistently at a 30% utilization to make your $200,000 back. Whereas with the Hyundai Sonata, taking into account $664 per month, you are making about 9.41% of that vehicle value back every single month, which means that after 10.5 months, you've actually recouped the cost of that car in its entirety. This is where, whenever it comes to low-end economy cars, you can make a killing because the ROI is just insane. And it's where you can make your money back and then some extremely quickly, and then you're basically protected in the case that you need to sell your car or something happens or your car gets totaled. And this is where there's a huge upside with this low-end economy model. Like, for example, I have a 2007 Ford Focus that I've owned for years. It's the longest car that I've had in my fleet. It's also one of my worst performers, but it's utilized like crazy because it's so cheap. I purchased this car back in 2017 for $2,300. It's priced at $25 per day. I make consistently about $550 to $600 profit off of that car every single month, which means that every single year I make about $6,000 to $7,000 off of that vehicle. So I make 3 to 4 times the value of my Ford Focus every single year. And I've been renting this car out on Turo for 5 years. So the ROI with these types of cars is just insane. And so, while sure, whenever you're renting out something like a Lamborghini Huracan, your cash flow, the amount that you're bringing in each and every month, is huge. I mean, $922,000 is an astronomical amount of money. But whenever you talk about how much it took to make that money, the numbers become significantly less impressive. But let's head back to my desk and I'll give you guys some of my final thoughts whenever it comes to a fleet like this. Now, whenever I was going through and recording this video and going through the numbers prior to filming, I've ultimately come to the conclusion that it is too difficult to say whether or not this host is actually telling the truth. But it certainly is possible that she's making $922,000 per year. But I guess the ultimate problem that I have with these types of articles that really glamorize exotic fleets like this is that this is an extremely risky business to be a part of. Owning exotic cars to rent those cars out on Turo is something that's incredibly risky because there is so much overhead. And this is something that I've talked about in a number of my videos. This is why I am such a proponent of the cash car model, because there is no payment associated with my cars. My fleet is relatively recession-proof and there is an extremely limited amount of overhead with operating my fleet. My fleet could essentially shut down business tomorrow and I would be able to liquidate my fleet for about $175,000 and I'd be able to walk away and spend that money on something else, like an investment property. But a host that has 69 exotic cars that could be valued anywhere between $3 and $10 million, that same circumstance simply isn't true. If a person who owns 60 exotic cars, their Turo profile gets deleted tomorrow, they are going to be in a ton of trouble, and that trouble could very easily lead to something like a bankruptcy. I always use the example of COVID. Whenever COVID hit, there was a 2-week period of time where I did not get a single rental. Every single one of my cars was sitting down at my lot. And while there were a lot of other hosts during this period of time that were sweating and getting nervous about not being able to make their car payments, I was perfectly fine. Sure, I wasn't making a lot of money, but I was able to basically bring my expenses down to zero, and I was able to ride out the COVID wave, and I was able to come out the other side stronger than ever. That's because all of my cars were paid for in cash, and they still are today. If you're somebody that wants to buy yourself a nice car, and in order to justify the purchase, you want to rent it out on Turo to just make yourself feel better or offset some of the costs, I think that can be a really great play. But if you are somebody who's wanting to make the most money as possible renting cars on Turo, I simply do not think the exotic car market is the right market to target. With exotic cars, I think that the real money is made with hourly rentals, and that's what you see with a lot of these exotic rental car companies like Royalty Exotics. You also have to be in a very specific market. I think Miami is the right type of market for this, but I think Turo is the wrong platform. At the end of the day, I think that this host could very well be telling the truth. I think that Rob's assessment of what's going on with this Turo fleet is probably also very accurate, but it really depends on whether or not this $922,000 is the host earnings or if it's her take-home pay. And based off of the article, we just simply don't know the answer to that. If her host earnings is $922,000, well then Rob's assessment is 100% accurate. If her take-home pay is $922,000, well then my assessment would probably be a bit more accurate. Either way, I think that the exotic car market is something not to be messed with, and I know for sure I will not be doing any exotic cars in my own Turo fleet anytime soon, if ever at all. But like always, you guys, I hope that you enjoyed this video. If you have any questions, comments, if you have anything to add, I would love to hear it, so make sure to leave a comment down below. And while you guys are at it, make sure to hit the like button, hit that subscribe button, and hit the notification bell, and I will see you guys in the next video.